How do you know if you're fertile or not? Why doesn't IVF always work? What should anyone consider fertility treatment or egg freezing know before they get started? Finally, why do women feel more confused about their reproductive health despite access to so much information online? Here to answer these questions and more is my dear friend and accomplished fertility expert, Dr. Lucky Sehkon, board certified in OBGYN and reproductive endocrinology, practicing at RMA in New York City, and educating the public through an incredible social media presence on Instagram, TikTok, and with her latest contribution, her new book, The Lucky Egg, Understanding Your Fertility and How to Get Pregnant Now, coming to bookstores everywhere in January 2026. Welcome to Brave and Curious. I'm your host, Dr. Lora Shahine, double board certified OBGYN and reproductive endocrinologist, and I love us staying brave and curious together. Today, I am curious all about fertility, education, and how to handle all the information online today. I cannot wait to introduce you to my dear friend and excellent fertility expert, Dr. Lucky Sehkon. Welcome to the show, Lucky.
Thank you for having me. We have to find better ways to catch up, but I'm glad I'll take anything I can get.
I know. I introduced you as like my dear friend, and it's so true. And I was like, when is the last time we really had a time to connect? And I was like, oh, I'll just have her on the podcast and we can catch up.
Well, I love that. And I love being here. Thank you for having me. This is a wonderful show. And I love all the education and everything you do online. I'm such a huge fan of yours. So it means a lot to me that you'd have me on your show.
Well, right back at you. You are doing so much to educate and to dispel myths and to share an evidence-based approach. And I just wanted to start off by, I want everyone to understand exactly what it takes to become a reproductive endocrinologist. Like, how many years of schooling did it take for us to get to where we are?
I know it's weird when you sometimes sit back and think about that, right? It's like, I feel like I blacked out for like a decade and a half, but it takes so long. And the advice I always give to people who feel like they have this insurmountable, thing to climb is break it up into pieces. And that's exactly the advice I took myself. So it's like, you do your undergrad degree. I did a bachelor's in science but you don't have to do that to get into med school. And then I went to medical school. And then after that, I got into OBGYN residency. There was a lot of like research and unpaid internships in that time frame just to kind of get, some things on my CV and get experience with doing research. And that's actually how I stumbled upon the field of REI.
Yeah.
I had a unpaid internship between, years during undergrad at the Cleveland Clinic. And I worked with a bunch of andrologists and like people that were studying sperm and antioxidants and all these things. And that's where I learned about things like IVF and egg freezing. And I was like, this is so cool. The fact that this didn't exist, before the 70s and it's like moving at breakneck speed. Like I want to be part of this and it's so empowering. So then I decided, okay, I'm going to go to medical school. And then in medical school, I was very motivated and interested in women's health and felt very much like I'm on this path to become a fertility doctor, but I'm going to remain open to other possibilities. But nothing else really got me feeling as passionate and as excited about medicine as the field of women's health. So I went into OBGYN fully knowing, listen, things happen. You might not get into the fellowship you want. Like you have to be committed and willing that you would want to be a general OBGYN. And I really immersed myself in all the things, but I did 4 years of residency. And luckily I got into my fellowship, then subspecialized for another 3 years. And I did all of that here in New York. And then I stayed on as an attending where I did my fellowship. Which is so funny because like people give you so much advice and kind of warnings about like working where you trained and like, will you ever shed your identity as a trainee? And I feel confident in saying that 6 years into practice, I do not feel like a trainee.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. And you're in RMA in New York City right now, right?
Yeah,
awesome.
Exactly.
So you did all of your training and studying in New York.
No, I only became an American in 2021. So I grew up in Canada. Sorry, I didn't tell you the story properly. I grew up in Canada. I went to McGill in Montreal, and I actually have had a Canadian and British passport just through birth because of my parents. My parents were UK citizens. So I actually went overseas, thought I was going to live in Europe for the rest of my life, potentially, because I have a lot of family there still. And I went to Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland for medical school. And then when I was there and I remained committed to this track of becoming an REI, it might be different now, but back then they didn't really have like a well-defined path. And what I
Mm.
wanted was to know, like, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to get here and this is what's going to happen. And it felt a little bit more convoluted and I just wanted a secure path. And, I didn't end up settling there. And that's
Yeah.
when I matched back in New York.
Wow, I love that. And I love how you got introduced to this field really early along and kind of had this sort
Mm-hmm.
of direct path. I'm the total opposite. I had nobody in my family that was in medicine at all, sort of stumbled into it, really had no idea. I loved everything in medical school, finally really wanted to focus on women's health, did OBGYN, and then really, really discovered IVF at my, residency at UCSF. And it was just like, oh my gosh, this is what I was meant to be. And it just sort of, I love the different sort of layers and paths. And something that we also share is this, education, this
Mm-hmm.
dedication to helping other people kind of really navigate this incredibly confusing time with all this information online about fertility and reproductive health. And I'm just curious how you got motivated to do all this education and, how you got inspired to do your book. You're just doing so many amazing things, Lucky.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I would have to guess that, and you tell me if I'm right. I think like our motivations are probably the exact same. It's from sitting across from patients in our office and seeing the huge knowledge gap, and also them bringing things to the table and saying, "Hey, I heard this," and it's like, there's so much confusing messaging being fed their way, and it's like on one hand, it's great that there's so much more information than there was available to our parents and our
Yeah.
grandparents, many, many years ago when they were going through things like this. And, people never talked about it. So I think it's great we're talking about it. I think it's great people are sharing information and people are sharing their stories with each other online. And there's these amazing online communities that they follow you, they follow me. And at the same time, sometimes it's information overload. And
Mm-hmm.
what they really need is an expert voice to help them kind of wade through fact versus fiction. And, it's such a time sensitive thing, and resources, are such an important issue as well. And so you never want people to spend time, money, effort, and put their hopes in things that aren't necessarily the right thing to be focusing on. So I think the motivation just comes practically. And it's almost like, yes, everyone's always like, "Oh, it's so good you're doing this." It's like altruistic, but in a weird way, there's a selfishness to it, right? Because my day job is to treat patients and help them understand what's happening with their body, figure out what's going on, and come up with a tailored plan to target, whatever needs to be treated to help them get to their goal. And sometimes with all that noise and distraction, and them on top of it feeling really anxious about it, it distracts from the actual issue. And so I kind of view social media as like, this is my megaphone, and it kind of helps prevent a lot of like distractions and conversations that don't need to happen about
Mm.
certain things, because it's like you're just putting the information out there, and if your patients can benefit from those conversations one to one, you better believe there's a lot of people that need to hear that information that maybe haven't gotten to a doctor yet. So I don't know, it is like an altruistic thing, and it takes a lot of our time.
Yeah.
I know that you spend a lot of time doing this as well, but it helps your practice because
Mm-hmm.
everyone feels more informed. And then you're also helping other people that will never be your patient, which is
Yeah.
really gratifying.
Yeah. I think one thing that motivated me too was I know I'm maybe I think I'm turning 50 this year. I think I finished fellowship in 2009, so I am a
Mm-hmm.
little bit uh, further away from practice. And when I struggled with my own infertility journey and going through IUIs and IVF and embryo transfers, you know, it was so humbling to do that as a fertility expert. And
Yeah.
I felt so lost and had so many feelings of shame and anger and frustration that what I see social media is doing is helping people feel less alone.
Yeah. A
Um,
hundred percent.
and so I do appreciate that education piece, but I also think for me, I was just like, oh my gosh, like I wish I had Lucky Sehkon, to follow on Instagram when I was going through IVF,
Mm-hmm.
even as a fertility doctor. And I did
Yeah.
hear your interview on the world's first podcast, which is excellent. We will link it in the description because it is such a good interview. A lot of basic questions that are answered, but you shared that you struggled with infertility as well.
Secondary infertility.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's interesting is like if you take a step back, zoom out, It was a relatively simple, straightforward journey, right? But it was only because I believe it was only because I had the knowledge and the expertise and access to resources. And I just at baseline, my nature is to be extremely strategic and like, what is the shortest distance between point A and point B? And I try to help my patients strategize when they're coming to me and saying, I want to have 2 to 3 kids, and let's just start with IUIs, but maybe they're 38 and maybe like
Yeah.
that's not the most strategic thing. So I try to look at everything with that lens of just trying to be strategic and smart and think about the big picture. And I did that for myself. I
Mhm.
actually did that for myself. And I'm really grateful that I did. And I think there's a lot of different paths to get to success. But for me, I took a really proactive step and I
Mhm.
froze embryos with my husband shortly after my daughter was born. And I did have like a red flag or nagging worry because we're all humans. And even though, as a fertility expert, I say low AMH doesn't necessarily tell you anything about your fertility, seeing that my AMH had dropped over time, which is a normal biological phenomenon. I was in my mid 30s, made me feel concerned. And what was more than that, I felt very overwhelmed at the prospect of trying to rush and have kids back to back with my career and everything. So as soon as I was done breastfeeding, like at the 6 month mark, I was like, I'm freezing embryos. Let's do this. I didn't expect that to be a harder experience,
Mhm.
and it was a little bit like I didn't just do one retrieval and get what I needed, but I made progress, and I don't have any complaints about how it went. But it was a little bit, it was humbling. It was a lot humbling to have low response, to have a canceled cycle. I remember being a little bit in denial when my colleague was scanning me. He was my doctor and a very good friend of mine, Dr. Eric Flisser, and he was scanning me. And he was like, I don't know why, but like you're not really responding as well as I thought you would. And I think we should just like call it and start over with a different protocol. And that sucked, And
Yeah.
so like it gave me a perspective that now I have whenever I am confronted with that type of decision making and having those conversations. But then the harder thing was like the cycle after that. I actually said, you know what, again, it's a low response, but let's just go for it because it is what it is at this point. We had made changes in the protocol and I only got 2 eggs. And
Mm.
I felt so embarrassed about it. I felt
Mm.
so ashamed, like all of these weird emotions that I did not anticipate feeling. I thought
Mhm.
I could just intellectualize my way out of the situation. I like shut the door of my office and like hid in my office and cried. I was like, and then both fertilized. I was like, okay, great. And nothing turned into an embryo. So that
Yeah.
was another wasted cycle. And eventually, with persistence, I got there and I got the embryos I wanted. And I was very lucky on the other end that, like, years later, lo and behold, what I had planned for happened. I couldn't get pregnant on my own. I was 37. And then I resorted to a transfer. And that thankfully went very smoothly. I know so
Mm.
many people struggle even with that step. But I was very lucky and it worked the first time. But I don't know how it would have gone had I not been proactive. And I honestly know in my heart of hearts, even if I was still a physician, but not a fertility doctor, I don't know that I would have done it.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would have been like, oh, I'm married. I already have a kid. Like, it'll be fine. Like I would
Yeah.
have told myself things that was bad advice. I know that. And so I'm so grateful that I had the knowledge and the ability to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we really, we're not taught about fertility through general medical training. And
No.
even in OBGYN, my residency, which is absolutely wonderful, we really just did not learn about like
Mm-hmm.
actual options and fertility. It's not like we're gatekeepers, like as reproductive endocrinologists and IVF practitioners, but just the general knowledge is just really kind of not there. And it's a hard balance because how do you balance like fear mongering, like, oh my gosh, age 35 is like this fertility cliff, with
Mm-hmm.
like, no, you really should understand that, half of your eggs aren't going to be functioning very well, towards your mid 30s. And, I
Yeah.
think you and I get kind of, pushback kind of either way. Like we're over educating, we're fear mongering, like just let
Mm-hmm.
people, uh,
Yeah.
take supplements. And I don't know, it's just such a hard balance.
I talk about this all the time. I mean, my husband is a witness to all of this because he met me when I was like 28 and now we're in our early 40s. And it was just so funny because, he's not a medical person. And I was like, this is what we're doing in my 40s. We're going to start trying. Like I had this whole plan. And honestly, even as a medical student, like I should have known better, but I didn't because the general education's not there. I hadn't thought about getting pregnant seriously and like since my health class in high school. It was
Mm-hmm.
just not top of mind. And I think that we can, even as medical people who aren't in this specific field, you can look at the headlines, and it's even subconscious, like just seeing older celebrities like getting pregnant with
Mm-hmm.
IVF, and seeing people get pregnant with IVF but not knowing the full story, not knowing necessarily how many cycles it took, how much they struggled, or the fact that they froze beforehand. Like it seems easier than it is, and it seems like a guaranteed success, and IVF just seems so like this is high tech, and it's also wired into our subconscious that the amount of effort and grit that you put into something is going to equal results. So I think I fooled myself into thinking I'm not going to be ready. We'll think about it in our late 30s, early 40s, and worst comes to worst, I'll do IVF. Only once I became an REI trainee, a fellow, that's when I was like, no, no, no. In order to facilitate that plan, that potential plan, I need to freeze something. Like, this is not a good idea. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up moving up our timeline to start trying, because I started seeing women that were struggling even when they did IVF and they were trying to control everything. So if I felt all of those things and had those misconceptions, what is the general public thinking?
Yeah, I know. I'm curious what you think your experience with fertility and even just doing shots and waking up from an egg retrieval, like how does that impact how you practice and how you care for your patients?
Well, I don't think everyone has to be like this, but I'm pretty open with my patients. And I try to be careful about that, because I feel like it can, when people are going through something bad that happens to them, it's not always the right thing to do to be like, well, in my case, it's like not about
Yeah.
you. But sometimes it is helpful, I think, for them to hear that perspective. Like, I've been where you are. I know it sucks. Like, this is not easy, because some people try to be really stoic too. And they're like, it's okay, whatever. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, you're going to grieve this. There is
Yeah.
some sense of grief at a canceled cycle or a failed cycle, because it is, dashing your hopes. It is
Mm-hmm.
going from having a thought, a hope of what this could end up in, and that just going away. And it's okay to grieve, and it's okay to feel sad about it. We don't have to be like logical robots that just keep trudging forward. We're human beings, and there's also hormones that can
Mm-hmm.
make the emotions that much more intense. And for me, I love where I work and I love everyone I work with, but I found cycling where I work intense when it didn't go well. When it's going well, it's like, whatever, my life's an open book. But when it's not going well, you don't always want to talk about it. And you're like, I just want to avoid everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, I think it gave me a lot of empathy for my
Yeah.
patients. I think it gave me a lot of patience.
Yes.
So that when people ask, like in air quotes, like silly questions, there is no silly question. Um, and I think you don't have to go through infertility or go through IVF to be a good IVF doctor at
Yeah.
all. I'm not saying that at all, but I think for me, um, another thing that you said is, we really do live in such a world of like immediate outcomes
Mm-hmm.
for the amount of effort that you give. And this is one of the hardest experiences. We're seeing people who are not used to being in the medical system or having to come to appointments and take medication.
Yeah.
And they sort of are under this feeling that, IVF is high tech and super expensive. And it's like ordering off a menu. Like, I want to
Yeah.
have, two kids, a boy and a girl, 2 years apart. And like, I just want
Yes.
the number of embryos that's going to give me that outcome, like snap of my fingers. And to face the reality that we're not
Mm-hmm.
in control it's a real shock to a lot of people. And helping them navigate, I think, has
Yeah.
been really an important part of this process for me.
Yeah, that resonates so much. And I think as fertility doctors, it's hard because every new patient is on their own journey.
Yeah.
And like that resonates so much, that idea that like people come in, and it's not in a bad way. It's just like they don't know any better. Just like I didn't know any better when I was a medical student, right? They do come in with this perception. And when it comes up a lot, and tell me if you agree, when people have frozen eggs or frozen embryos, I get a lot of patients coming back to me for a follow-up, and they're like, well, I'm ready now. I have a partner, or like, I had a partner, we froze embryos, and now we're ready. And I'm like, okay, how long have you been trying? I'm not trying. Isn't it
Yeah.
just better for me to go straight to what I froze? And I'm like, not necessarily. Like,
Yeah.
I kind of want to save these for a rainy day, because that doesn't always go to plan. And so like, if we can get you pregnant on your own without the need for intervention, and then save these for when it might be harder, interventions might not be as successful. Like, that's kind of more strategic, right? Going back to the strategy. So
Yeah.
um, it's a big shift, trying to make people feel realistically, like, what does it take to get pregnant, and knowing that them doing all the right things in their life and like being in control of every facet of their health, their career, their relationship now, doesn't mean that we can control everything that we're doing when it comes to our role as fertility experts that are trying to help people get pregnant.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really interesting nuance, because there's definitely a message out there that, using the eggs and embryos that you have frozen from when you were younger is definitely, better, for however you want to define the word better. And I love your ability to kind of talk about all options and not just make assumptions, not just walk in the door and like, okay, that's what you want. Great. No, let's talk about it and think about it. I love that.
Yeah.
We're going to get back to learning more and this wonderful discussion with Lucky in just a second, but I wanted to pause for a moment and thank you so much for being here. Take a moment to follow the show wherever you're listening. And if you could also take a minute to give us a 5-star review and let us know what you find valuable about the show, it means so much. It helps others find the show and it helps me know what you want to learn about. Now let's get back to learning. IVF has changed so much through my career. Even the fact that we are able to have this conversation and think about it as strategy. I mean, when I first started practicing, success rates were in the single digits. I heard you say that on a podcast recently, and I absolutely agree. And I remember transferring, 4 or 5 embryos and being so hopeful if we got pregnant. And if someone had triplets, you're like, oh, oops, like, sorry about that. And like to be in a place where you can transfer a single, screened embryo and have a over 65% chance of live birth, and think about freezing as truly a strategic method if you need it in the future. That is just an absolute 180 from when I started.
Which is crazy because I think, I'm like around 8 years behind you, and this is all I've ever known in my career.
Amazing.
And so my mentors are like, you're so spoiled. Like, it's so much easier and it must be because I can't. And also there's now more insurance coverage too.
Yes.
Right. So it's like
true.
Easier from that perspective. I can't even fathom having a conversation with a patient saying like, we're at a place where insurance will probably never cover this at this time. And there's a 5% chance, maybe 10 at the most, that this could work depending on how many embryos we put in. It's maddening, to think that that's what people went through, and not to say it isn't hard now. And it's like, I think the biggest hurdle for a lot of people is like being able to get that healthy embryo. And then there are patients that have problems with implantation. Right. But, it is so much more, it is so much more accessible than it's ever been. And it's so much more successful than it's ever been. And I think that, I hope that doesn't trigger anyone, because I want to make people feel hopeful and less afraid. Because a lot of times, and I'm sure you see this, when they're getting into the IVF pathway, maybe they find out their tubes are blocked, their partner has a low sperm count, whatever the issue, or even just moving on from IUI to IVF, there's this reluctance because people have heard all these horror stories of people that have done multiple cycles. And they're like, well, I don't want to go down that path because then I'm going to become like one of those people that's like on this never ending path and I'm going to do so many cycles and I just can't commit to that. And I'm like, we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You could be successful in one round. We don't know.
Yeah, I love that. It's you did not mean to do this, but it's a perfect pivot to what I wanted to talk about, because you said, and I do believe it's an exciting time to practice fertility, to be able to offer these high success rates with lower risks because it can be so successful with a single embryo transfer. Yet, I remember when patients were just grateful for the opportunity. Like, oh my gosh, we're actually going to be able to try IVF. And if it was successful, it was just this euphoric, like amazing experience. On the flip side, and I've really navigated this in 2 generations of fertility care, we're in such a Amazon now delivery. All this information is on the internet. We should be able to supplement our way to a perfect egg. We should be able to ask ChatGPT all the questions about our IVF protocol. And I'm not saying I love information. You and I are putting it out every single day, but it is also very difficult to navigate these exceedingly high expectations. And
Agreed.
so I'm just curious, like, how do you counsel your patients like that come? I don't know. You can totally tell when patients ask ChatGPT a question
Yeah.
and then they just like copy and paste it into an email. It's
Yeah.
just like so, formulated. And how are you balancing
Hmm.
all this information that's out there and these really exceedingly high expectations when someone has like an AMH of 0.1 and they're like, why don't I
Yeah.
have 20 embryos? My friend on Instagram just got
Yeah.
that.
I think the antidote to all of that, and I agree with you, I think it's all great, but that is like the dark side of it, is that sometimes it's information overload to the point where you feel like there's all these people in the room between you and the patient that are invisible. It's like the person that
Hmm.
they are following on Instagram and then like, the Reddit channel and whatever. It's like you don't feel like you can have a one-to-one conversation with your patient because there's all these interferences. It's like just the noise. And I think the antidote to that is the doctor patient relationship. I think when a patient trusts you, it is very easy to have like a very clear, thorough conversation. And I address everything, right? And I'm
Mhm.
like, email me anytime. We'll, have a follow-up call whenever. Tell me what your questions are and concerns. And I think that that works really well. You have to take the time and the effort. I think it goes both ways. Like as a doctor, I don't think it's going to cut it now to say like, well, I'm the doctor and like I'm just telling you like this is what it is. Patients are smart. Patients want to
Mhm.
understand the why. And I actually think just like when we learned in med school or anytime anyone's trying to learn anything, if you actually understand the inner workings, the why, the foundation of it all, everything becomes more clear. Like just taking things
Yeah.
at face value isn't necessarily the way to really feel comfortable. And the more they know, the more in control they feel and the less anxious they feel. So I think making sure as a doctor from my side that I'm explaining everything clearly.
Mhm.
And if after that explanation, like an example is like the ERA test, like now we have a lot more data and like I explain to patients like this
Oh,
is
and just a
why.
minute, like just say a little bit about what that is, because I can imagine someone listening saying, ERA, what's that?
Yeah, so it's the endometrial receptivity array. And it's just like one of those newer tests. Our field moves so quickly. And this was like a really intriguing, interesting test because it was based on this premise that, okay, we know the embryo is important. Embryos can be tested. And, we're doing as well as we can in that arena, trying to pick the best embryo and saying, at most, this gives us like a 60, maybe 70% chance at the most of pregnancy. But why are one third not implanting?
Yeah.
Right. And I think the assumption was if it's a PGT normal embryo, if it's tested, it's genetically normal. It's kind of like thought of as perfect, which is
Mhm.
a whole other topic. So there's got to be something else going on. And so there was this theory that some people just the way their biology works, their lining and how it responds to progesterone, which is supplemented to prepare for a transfer, but it's mimicking what your body normally naturally does when it's ovulating, right? In
Mhm.
preparation for the uterine lining to accept the embryo, that some people have a bit of a mismatch where maybe they could use an extra 12 hours or an extra day of progesterone or fewer days of progesterone. And everyone has this own personalized window that
Mhm.
really affects how likely the lining of the uterus is to accept the embryo. And I actually think it was a brilliant idea. And maybe there are some people that have that
Mhm.
problem, by the way. But this test, has gone through many different studies, and some are by the people that made the test. So a
Mhm.
lot of people who haven't made the test have studied it now. And we've looked at the data as a whole, and we're kind of like less convinced that this is like something that we all need to be doing as a blanket recommendation. But people really started doing it for all
Yeah.
patients before the first transfer, when really it was designed for those rarer cases of implantation failure where it's like 3 transfers haven't worked. And so anyway, I got asked about this a lot, and people are like, well, why aren't we doing it before the first
Yeah.
transfer? And I explained to them, I don't know that I trust the information, and I don't want to make decisions or changes based on this test, which is not really validated with the data we would need to really apply it in that way.
Yeah.
And I think when you explain, like, this could do more harm theoretically, and this is why, patients understood. And, I never really had an issue where patients were like, well, no, I still want to do it. But the key was explaining and taking the time, and that takes effort,
Yeah.
and so I think there's the responsibility of the doctor.
Mhm.
And I think it's a challenge that we'll continue to come up against, but as long as there's patient doctor communication relationship and trust, that's really what it's going to come down to.
Yeah.
And that's how we combat all of the noise.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I mean, I remember being in medical school when Dr. Google really came out.
Yeah.
So I went to medical school in North Carolina. It was a very, this was, early 2000s, very kind of paternalistic still, right? Like the
Yeah.
doctor is the doctor and the patient is the patient, and you just kind of listen to whatever they say. And my attendings would get so frustrated with patients that would bring in these like printed
Mm-hmm.
off internet Google questions,
Mm-hmm.
and just get really frustrated. And I too felt like you, like this
Mm-hmm.
kind of new generation of, wait, this is great. Actually, they have access to questions and care and can advocate. And you can't just shut down the internet. You can't
Right.
like take people off Reddit rabbit holes. But you can have these conversations with them. And a very common conversation I have with my patients is the fertility and miscarriage community is extremely vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking for answers. It is so easy in our country to get a test approved by the FDA,
Yeah.
but that's before it's been shown to really be helpful with any of the interventions that you could do based on the
Right.
results of this test. And so I feel like my job is to really try to interpret the data and try to protect you from spending $100,000 on tests
Yeah.
and doing interventions that honestly could be harmful, but yet
Yes.
also connecting with them and saying like, I want the answers too. Like we're in
Yeah.
this together. I'm not like a gatekeeper of a
Mm-hmm.
test. I just want you to realize that it might not have the answer that you're looking for.
I mean, I'm sure you get this asked to you all the time. Someone who's really savvy and they're like, listen, what would you do for me if I had 3 failed transfers already? Now do that. And it's like,
Oh yeah.
it doesn't work that way. And it's hard to explain
Yeah.
sometimes, that sometimes doing too much can actually detract from the overall outcome.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really important conversation to have. And I do think that you're right that it's that uh, doctor-patient relationship and the access to, like you talked about, answering questions, having frequent follow-up
Mm-hmm.
visits or answering email. I think it's when people are sort of sitting in their own questions and like able to stay up late at night, and they might not be able to, I mean, the doctor
Mm-hmm.
can't answer email all day, but like
No.
some sort of touch points where you're like, okay, I know I'm going to be able to sit down and talk to that person, or
Yeah.
even the nurse, I think is really, really helpful.
And I don't necessarily think every fertility doctor out there has to do what we're doing, but I think
Yeah.
what we're doing is a reaction to everything we're seeing. And, I made a blog, a website, because I wanted there to be a landing page for people. Like if everyone's going to be on Google and ChatGPT, like let me throw my hat in the ring and say, you
Yes.
know what? There's also content from me here to
Yeah.
rely on. And so that's the other piece. I think the doctor patient relationship, but also, people are like, well, then where do I look? What do I read? Do you have any resources? And that's where my blog was born from, is that I do think it's very unrealistic and insane to expect, even if I spend the full hour of a new patient consult telling everyone everything they need to know about the reproductive biology, what it takes to get pregnant, the tests we're going to run, and then the potential treatment paths, and then any follow ups we have thereafter. It's like, they need something to really let it all soak in and
Mm-hmm.
to be able to go back and refer to it. So what better way than to control the narrative and say, well, this is from me,
Yeah.
and so you can go to this page and find these resources. But also, like, other resources are, ASRM has a lot of
Mm-hmm.
patient facing information. And so I rely heavily on that
Yeah.
because I want patients to not just blindly trust what I'm saying. I want them to corroborate it with other resources. But I like to try to control the resources, or at least point them to the ones that I think are trustworthy, because then you're helping them navigate and they're not kind of going down a bad Google rabbit hole, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah. And it's hard to get people to pay attention when you're speaking in like evidence-based terms and you're
Yes.
trying to explain the nuances with research about how, like, well, this wasn't, studied with very many patients, or it wasn't really
Mm-hmm.
studied in patients that have never done an embryo transfer. It's really studied in patients that have, not been successful with three. And you're actually recording this from the green room, right? At NBC in New York. You were just telling me that you were just on trying to explain that Tylenol is not going to make your baby have autism. Like
Right.
these
Headlines.
headlines and the snippets and the influencers that can just make these claims
Yeah.
get more attention.
Yeah, it's clickbait, right?
Yeah.
Like the salacious, like I'm sure everyone gets fed this, or maybe we get it fed to our algorithm more because we actually create content. Anyone who creates content gets fed these like tips and tricks, like here's like the first line you should say to get the person grabbed in. And it's like, well, that's what's wrong with social media,
Yes.
is that everything is this salacious soundbite or clickbait. And then you go to read and like watch the whole thing. You're like, oh, it's not actually that deep, right?
Yes.
And the same goes true with all of this new information. It's not new information, but it's like recycled information from really suboptimal, not well designed studies. And it's just now in the headlines. And so, I think about all the poor women who are pregnant right now with a headache or, with a fever that are thinking twice about their doctor's recommendations to treat their pain and their fevers adequately. So I was really happy to be on to talk about this. And I think, there's a multi-pronged approach. It's like what we talk to with our patients and the information we provide online, whether that's through social media or on the internet, through websites, podcasts, and then like mass media, right? Because they love those headlines and they need the experts like us to come in and make the effort to break it down. But it's not easy. It's like, you have 3 minutes. It's a complicated topic. It's not easy to get right. But, I always say some people love jumping out of an airplane. And for me, I like going on live television and having that challenge.
Good for you. Well, I will link the interview to the description below. But what did you say on NBC today?
Well, I basically said, with pregnant women, it's very hard to study pregnant women and their exposures the way we would like to in an ideal scientific way, because, for ethical reasons, you're not going to say, okay, pregnant patient A, like, let's give you this and then not give it to B and like, let's just see what happens, right?
Yeah.
So we're relying on observational studies, which means basically we're saying, here, fill out this questionnaire. Can you think back to when you were pregnant and tell us, did you take Tylenol? Did you drink soda? What did you do? What did you not do? And then we try to, as scientists, we're trying to look at the clinical data and say, okay, there might be a connection. That connection is what we call an association. It's saying, these two things seem to go together, but that doesn't mean that one causes the other or the other causes, the first thing. So the best example I can think of is actually Karen Tang, Dr. Karen Tang, who's an OBGYN that we know and love.
Yes.
She has the book, It's Not Hysteria, which is fantastic. Highly recommend it. She posted a video on this topic, and I love what she said, because she was like, okay, shark attacks increase in frequency in the summer, right? People are in the water a lot more. People are also eating more ice cream. But am I going to put out a study and believe a study that says, okay, ice cream causes shark attacks, right? Like there can be many things that run together. And the same is true when you're looking at this type of data. And what's interesting, and something I talked about on air, I was able to squeeze it into the 3-minute segment, was the fact that the best, most reliable study that we experts lean on is something that came out last year looking at over 2 million children. And they said, okay, yeah, we kind of do see like there is this kind of association. It's very mild. But when they actually drilled down and looked at specific households and compared the sibling that wasn't exposed according to the mom's recall to Tylenol in pregnancy and the sibling that was, that association went away. And so what they concluded was any weak, mild association in the initial data analysis was probably due to underlying genetics or the familial environment. And nothing new has happened. So that was my opener. I was like, there is actually no new causal link. This is repackaged old information. And as of now, the FDA and American College of OBGYNs and doctors like myself are still telling patients to treat fevers and pain with Tylenol. The other meds we have, like ibuprofen, are not safe in pregnancy. We know that. And leaving a fever untreated is actually an independent risk factor for these types of outcomes. So that was the gist of it. And I just hope anyone who's worried about these headlines feels better from hearing this.
Yeah, thank you. Correlation does not mean causation. Absolutely. Time and time again. Gosh, you are doing such a good job of educating, and your latest effort is your incredible book, The Lucky Egg. It's coming out in January. Tell me your motivation. Tell me what we're going to be able to find in the book. I'm really excited for you.
I want to share the story behind it, which I've never shared. I kind of alluded to it, and I was planning a post on it, but it's like, I want to get it right because it's such a great story. So basically, I've just been doing my thing on Instagram. I've had no grand plan. I wasn't sitting here being like, I'm going to write some big book one day. I was like, I'm just going to keep seeing patients, doing what I'm doing, and trying to make their lives easier. And then also trying to help other people. And it's fun, right? It's creative. It's an outlet. So like, it's a win-win.
Yes.
Like, why wouldn't we keep making content? We're
Yeah.
not going anywhere anytime soon. But in that process, there was someone that was following me and going through her journey.
Mhm.
And I had a friend slash like patient who was like, oh, I don't know. We were talking once and I just randomly said to her, like she said, what's the next step for you? And I said, I get frustrated that everything is confined to a grid and it's like all fragmented. And so like one day, I don't know when it will be. I don't know how I'd ever find the time, but like it'd be lovely to just put a book with like all of the evidence-based thoughts that I have on all these topics in one comprehensive place. And she was like, oh, she like kept it to herself, didn't really talk about her job too much. Ended up like she works, at a great agency and she's really good friends and works with a book agent.
Oh.
And that person was following me and she saw that we were mutual friends and she goes, how do you know her? And she was like, oh no, I've gone to her and she's my friend. She wants to write a book. And she was like, I'm going through this struggle and I'm a book agent and I can't find the
Yes.
perfect book to help me. And if she had a book, I would read it. And does she want to have a meeting? And I was like, yeah, of course I'll meet with
Amazing.
her. So I go and have this meeting, this like such great meeting where like we went way over time, wrote up like a whole outline. She was scribbling notes and I'm like rattling off what I think the chapter should be. And like weeks later, her own journey, she hit a snag. She had like a failed transfer. And then she was like, can I become your patient? Would that be weird if you were writing your proposal while I'm your patient? And I was like, whatever, this
Totally.
tracks. This is very on brand for me to like be embroiled in this weird situation. So she's like getting her follicles measured and also being like, I need that chapter. And I'm like, oh my God.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
So it was just the timing of it is like a movie because she found out she was pregnant when I found out about the book deal.
Oh,
I handed in my finished manuscript the weekend she had her baby.
oh my
And just
gosh.
last week I met her baby for the first time and it was so emotional and just like we're on like two parallel, very different journeys, but we both helped each other. And she really saw a vision and she kind of like
Oh,
told me I could do it. And I didn't know that I could do it. I don't know how I did it, but it was like the hardest thing I've ever done. And I'm really excited to share it with the world.
oh my gosh. That is a beautiful story. And Lucky, I will share with you. Um, uh, Writing a book is
Yeah,
very much like going through a pregnancy and finally, and
totally.
it is takes
Yeah,
so much work. It is so hard.
yeah.
And I'm
I feel
good.
like I'm postpartum now.
You are, and I have an idea for you. So
Okay.
Toni Weschler, who is a dear friend of mine, and she's the author of Taking Charge of Your Fertility, which is like it's in its 25th anniversary, like published every
Amazing.
year. It's like taught women how to track their cycles. Like she's absolutely amazing. She lives here in Seattle. She actually created a birth announcement when her first book was published
I love
and
that.
sent it to everyone like it was a birth announcement. And I
That's
think
so
that you should
funny.
maybe do that too.
No, because that's what it feels like. It feels
Hmm.
like I gave birth to a
Hmm.
book baby.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
And you've written a book like Not Broken about
yeah,
miscarriage and pregnancy
yeah.
loss. I mean, like I have to say, and I'm not blowing smoke. I swear this is so true. I think that you're one of the early inspirations,
Hmm.
because you've shown people in our position that this is what's possible. Like you can have a voice and not be discredited for being unprofessional. Not that that's ever been like a top of mind concern, but I think it's just not what we were taught. Like this possibility wasn't really on anyone's radar. And so
Yeah.
like you're one of the early pioneers in this space
Mhm.
and you've had a really strong voice and following in this space for a very long time. And so like it helped me, it helped
Great.
me because it kind of shows you the possibilities. Like you can see patients and be a great doctor and you can also contribute in all these other ways and help people beyond the walls of your clinic.
No, Lucky, thank you so much. And I will tell you, I definitely got a lot of pushback posting
Hmm.
on Instagram and
I'm
posting
sure.
on TikTok in October 2019 was my first TikTok. And I think where I am generationally, right, there's a lot of doctors that are, graduated before me. And I'm sort of
Yeah.
definitely one of the older, doctors that's doing something like this. And so my peers and my mentors, not everyone, of course, but definitely it was like, what are you doing? This is not professional. Like you should not be doing this. You shouldn't be trying to sell yourself on social media. And I was like, wow, you are totally missing the point.
Yeah.
This education has to be out there. It's like something
Yeah.
like 85% of people get their health information or ask their questions.
Exactly. And if you're not doing it, someone else will.
Exactly.
Control the narrative.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, you are doing a great job at this, Lucky. I'm so proud of you, and I am so excited for this book to get out into the world. So we can order it now, right?
Yes. It's available for pre-order. I'll share the link with you so you can share it with everyone.
I will.
But it's out on shelves January 13th. And I'm really excited to announce for the first time that basically anyone that pre-orders, before the actual book is out, will automatically have access to a community. I'm calling it the nest because the lucky egg.
Oh, that's so good.
It's kind of cute, right?
Yes.
And basically, we're going to do our first gathering. It's going to be virtual on the 29th, the Monday. That's what we're planning for. And it'll be capped because I want it to be I want it to be capped at 100 people.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be very private. There'll be a way to make public as well as private comments or send questions. And I'm going to have a way to send questions in before. And it's going to be a very organized kind of webinar for me to talk about certain topics and then take questions from the community and for, everyone to have kind of a conversation in a safe space. And I'm planning to do that, multiple times in the lead up to the book coming out. And maybe I hope even after, depending on what the reception is and if people find it really helpful.
That is awesome. I can't wait to look for the nest, and we will have a link in the description. And where else can people find you, Lucky?
So I'm on Instagram at lucky.sekhon, Sekhon, and my website, theluckyegg.com, has a lot of blog posts that go way beyond, what you can do with the 2,200 character limit in an Instagram caption in a 3-minute reel. So lots of deep dives on certain topics and calculators, like a pregnancy due date calculator, pregnancy milestone, egg freezing calculators, things like that. Just tools to try to, in a dynamic way, support you on your journey and give you as much education as possible.
Yeah, your website is an excellent resource. It's true, especially that egg freezing calculator where you can put in age and number of eggs and look at prediction models. And then just all of the resources with your blog are just really incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And again, I really mean it. Thank you for inspiring me to be here and to do the things that I'm doing and for being such a wonderful colleague and friend and a voice of reason online. I feel like we're like part of the same community and the work that we're doing is really important. And I love that we've had the opportunity to work together and I want to keep collaborating with you.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, thank you again, Lucky. Really appreciate you.
Thank you. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
I hope you enjoyed this incredible discussion with Dr. Lucky Sehkon. She is an institution in educating and helping us all keep it real when it comes to fertility and reproductive health. I am so excited for her new book, The Lucky Egg. Check it out anywhere you get your books in January 2026. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you to my team at Audiotocracy for another incredible episode. You can learn more from my website, drlorashahine.com. I've got links there to Instagram, TikTok, my YouTube channel with lots of reproductive health information and all the episodes of the Brave and Curious podcast. Thank you again for being here. And until next week, stay brave and curious.